What am I saying again?
This is MPW.
MPW.
The podcast.
With your host,
Xylo Aria. Cool.
A podcast about music production
for the everyday musician,
where we learn from experienced studio engineers and each other.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the MPW podcast. I'm your host, Xylo Aria, and today we are really lucky to be joined by our guest, Dan Giffin. So Dan is an Ableton Certified trainer, and he has taught loads of Grammy-winning artists the ins and outs of making music on Ableton. He also teaches through his own platform, live produces online, as well as runs his own podcast, Ableton Music Producer Podcast. So do check that out. It is awesome. So great to have you with us today, Dan. How are you?
Yeah, no, I'm so good. Thanks for having me. I was just telling you I woke up from a nap, so hopefully my brain turns on in the next hour. But yeah, it's exciting to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, big fan of like what you're doing, supporting women in the music industry. So that's always cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's such a pleasure. And yeah, we were chatting, which is funny because it's 6 p.m. for you and you've had a nap, and it's 8 a.m. for me and I've had a nap as well because I had an early morning. So I think we're both a little bit on the tired side, but we will see how we go.
Yeah, I mean, that's the music producer life, I guess. It's just like work hard, sleep whenever you can, whenever it's convenient.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, by the way, thanks for pronouncing my name correctly. The last 2 podcasts I was on, they didn't. So props
How
to you.
did they say it?
People like to add an R. There's like an imaginary R in there somewhere. Dan Giffin, but it's been Giffin forever. So I don't know where that came from.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. No worries. Glad I got that right.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So we are chatting today, Dan, about setting up the perfect home studio. And it's always an interesting topic because there's so many different ways you can go about it. And it can be quite overwhelming as well when you're first setting up. And we will dig into that a bit. But I'd love to hear a bit more about you and how you got to what you're doing today and where your journey started in music.
Yeah, I mean, long story short, I grew up in Ohio in this tiny little town in the Midwest, United States, and I would go to jazz camps with my neighbor. He was like a really accomplished jazz artist, and he was a session player with a lot of people playing trumpet. So he would come over into my basement every once in a while and jam. My mom was also pretty active in like the church growing up, in the music, in the choir that she directed. So like I was kind of forced to go there, and I'd play drums a lot. So that helped keep my chops alive, playing drums. But yeah, just played a lot, played in like random bands in high school, won a couple local talent shows. And then I went to college because that was what I was told I was supposed to do. And so I went to school and studied business, and hated it. Absolutely hated it. And I was like, this is terrible. Like, I got in trouble because I would wear like sweatpants and like my Grateful Dead t-shirts in business class, and like just didn't enjoy college. And in the midst of that, they had like a couple of talent shows and things. So I decided that I would do like a remix contest. So I downloaded GarageBand, had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And I would just take like songs and chop them up and try to mix them into each other. It didn't sound fantastic now that I look back and listen to it, although at the time I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And then I would just play drums on top of these electronic tracks that I was remixing of like Skrillex. This is like 2012, 2011. And I would just like remix these dubstep tracks and play drums on top of them, and kind of like actually did pretty well. Like I won the talent show, and I had a couple shows that I got playing some small gigs around the area. And then I graduated. I got my big boy degree in business, and I was like, I don't want to do this. It sounds terrible. I can't see myself in an office 9 to 5 every day. So I moved to New York City, and I, with the help of my stepdad at the time, he was like a huge support of my music and just kind of was like all for it. So he sent me off to school in New York City and studied out there for a year at a school called Dubspot. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Yeah, so it's not there anymore. It's online, but it was like one of the the pioneers of electronic music production as far as education goes. And they had a location in LA and New York City. But I was really fortunate to learn from some amazing Ableton certified trainers. They were actually the first school to really make Ableton Live tutorials and electronic music production tutorials huge on YouTube back in the day. They were like one of the first. So yeah, I just learned Ableton, became a huge nerd in the world of music production out there. Was blessed to meet Daniel Wyatt and Ross Kiva. Daniel is a multi-platinum audio engineer. So after I finished my Ableton class, I was like, why does my music still sound like crap? Like, I can make music, but it just doesn't sound polished like all these other tracks I'm hearing on the radio. So I took his course and then ended up running out of money trying to move in Brooklyn. And my roommate backed out. And anybody who lives in New York City or Brooklyn knows that you don't normally live by yourself because it's so expensive. So I ended up I had no roommate, so I just moved back to Indianapolis where my family relocated. And my dog was here too, so that was nice because I loved her. So I got to see my dog and moved back and saved up a bunch of money, basically bought my own home studio and started teaching random people that I met, made some friends, started going out to a bunch of shows in the Indianapolis local community. And just became known as the Ableton guy, I guess, and realized that I could teach online and not have to drive to people's homes all the time. So started Live Producers Online, my website, where I have like a membership where you can access all my courses and everything. And still teaching today. Started a podcast about 3 years ago and never expected it to become my big boy job. So hopefully in the next year, that's going to be my main gig. So it's been a wild ride and a journey. Yeah. So that's a long story short, basically.
Yeah, I love that. There's so many kind of twists and turns there, which I think you've just kind of carved a spot for yourself, starting by doing a course in something that you weren't really interested in, and then kind of flying across the country, and then just finding a space in something, and then turning it into your own little world, with Live Producers Online, and now the podcast as well. So that's awesome. I love when people kind of just create their own thing, and so that's really cool.
Thank you. I think it's a combination of like jumping from thing to thing because I'm ADD, but also because I'm the kind of person where I can't sit still. Like I always have to be doing something. I always am like looking for that next thing. It's just part of my personality and being really driven. So I don't know, like deep down inside, I always felt like music was a part of who I am. Like I've always resonated with it, and not even just one style of music. Like I said, I grew up playing jazz, but sonically, electronic music is so much more interesting because you can create any sound in your head. So, I have a project called Philia, which I totally didn't even mention. I probably should have. Philia. And that was a project I started about 4 years ago. And I was releasing under my own name, Dan Giffin, but I decided to kind of reinvent myself and make more like jazz-infused bass music kind of stuff. So that's been interesting as well. And playing shows and meeting people through Philia has been really fun. But yeah, I never would have guessed or expected I'm doing what I am today. Life is kind of weird like that. Just takes like random crazy turns.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned you've been, you jumped around because you've gotten bored or something. But I think even in that, there's something special about in that space sticking to building something, because we were talking before about running something like this and how much is involved and how you have to do literally everything. And it could be easy to say, oh, I'm bored of this now, it's too much, and I'm going to move to something else. So so that's awesome.
Well, I mean, since we are talking about music production, that is something I see all the time with either my students or other people in general. Getting into music it's not easy. Like it's hard to actually see your progress. If I start playing basketball, right, and I pick up a ball and I start shooting hoops every day, within a matter of a week, I can start to see, oh, I'm getting better at this. Music production is not necessarily the same way. It's definitely more ambiguous, and it's very subjective to whatever you're feeling in the moment and what you're creating. And when you're newer, I think it's easier to get discouraged and want to give up and like question the meaning of your life because your music sounds like trash, and you start to hate yourself and you're like, why am I even doing this? And people give up way too easy. Like people give up too fast. And I think, for me, I see students who are like, oh, like you've been doing this and you're like a great producer or teacher or whatever. And I was like, dude, I've been doing this for like over 10 years now, as far like every single day. And when I first started learning Ableton Live, one of the first things that my teacher taught me was like you're gonna get out of it whatever you put in it. So I made it a point every single day. I spent at least 20 minutes every single day for like the first year since I opened Ableton Live, just to spend at least 20 minutes every day. And I did, sometimes even longer, and like honestly just accelerated the whole process of producing so much faster for me just by doing it every day. It's like muscle memory. So.
Oh, I love that. That's really good, actually. And because I think a lot of people are like, oh, I don't have time for this. I've got too much going on, and then they just associate getting better with spending hours at a time. But it's probably better, like you said, to spend 20 minutes a day rather than 2 hours every 2 weeks.
Yeah, like honestly, I spend probably 10 to 15 minutes a day just brushing my teeth. So it's like you can do that if you need to. Like, takes you probably 15 minutes to shower. So like if you have to skip showering that day just to make music, do it. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to kill you. It's not that hard. You just do it. That's how I feel.
Okay, expert advice from Dan. Don't shower and produce music. All right, cool.
Yeah, exactly. Save time. There you go. That's all I have for you today. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening.
It's been fun. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. No, that's a great start to everything, and a few gems there already, which is awesome.
Hi, my name is Amelia. I'm from Russia, and this episode is brought to you by DistroKid. Did you know that using DistroKid's promo card feature, you can create easy, customizable graphics to promote your Spotify release? You can upload a personalized design to appear with your music that you've released through DistroKid on Spotify. This is also a great way to promote your release and drive increased shares, streams, and saves of your music. This is a free feature for all DistroKid members. Take advantage of this awesome function and so many more by using our DistroKid discount link, distrokid.com/VIP/MPW.
So if we talk about a studio setup, I mean, there's so many different elements, so many different things you can think about, but what would you say is the absolute first thing when you decide to create a home studio that you need to get or think about getting?
Yeah, I think that's like a really open-ended question because I think it depends on a couple things. Like my dream studio setup is probably different than yours or somebody else's. So for example, I'm a drummer. So my perfect setup is tracking live drums.
Cool.
So I'm going to need at least 5 inputs on an audio interface from my 5 microphones to be able to record all the things I need to record. So I think it's really open-ended in that sense. But as far as like you've never produced music, you want to get into producing music, say electronic music of sorts, maybe it's hip hop or whatever, then I would say get a decent computer, whatever that looks like, Mac or PC. I'm definitely a Mac person, but to each his own. And then I would say some headphones. Get some decent headphones. Like right now I'm wearing the Audio-Technica M50s. It's like $140. It's not expensive. So, I mean, get good headphones and a laptop or desktop computer.
Cool.
That's step one.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to record audio, like say you're a vocalist or a guitarist, you're going to need, an audio interface. So find something that is in your budget. For some of my students, they're like financial advisors and they just buy tons of gear that they don't even know how to use and they never actually get around to using it.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to start small. And if you have the money to invest in a small setup, then get good stuff, like get quality gear if you're serious about doing it. If you're just kind of testing the waters, like I see this a lot of people who are like, I want to make music, and they have no idea how to do it. and they get started and buy all this stuff, and then they're like, oh, this is really hard, I'm too busy, and they give up. It's like, don't waste your money. But if you know you're going to do it and you're serious about making music, buy quality stuff within your budget. So that computer, headphones, audio interface to record audio, and you don't need to go out and buy 6 billion fancy gear plugins, because we all get hit with those ads on Facebook or Instagram where it's like, buy our shit. It's, you need Serum, you need all this other stuff, and you don't need all that. I mean, having a good sound library is important. We could talk about that too, but there's a lot of plugins and stuff, especially that comes with Ableton Live, but also in other DAWs too.
Yeah, for sure. I think you've like summarized the whole episode there, Dan. So it's really, it's great actually to kind of look at it at that level, and kind of starting where you kind of started. You said it's useful to get a decent laptop, and I think that was a big turning point for me personally, where I was just like, right, I'm just going to invest in a MacBook Pro, because they're not cheap, and that decision changed my life. But and I know I tell people as well, Mac or PC, it's up to you, but I'm a Mac person. But I think it's interesting to talk about why you said as well you're definitely a Mac person, because I think there's a reason, and I have mine. Why have you chosen to go down that path?
Always kind of been, well, that's not true. My first laptop was a PC, but I didn't use it for music production. And I've been a Mac person ever since. But I will say PCs are not on a broad scale designed for audio drivers. And a lot of times one of the first things I'll do when I have a student, if they don't have an audio interface, I'll encourage them to download the ACO for All driver, because that works really well for an audio driver. Like Mac already has its own audio driver built in, and it works really well, and it's made for people who are video editing or people who are using audio software. So just from that standpoint, right away it works. However, I will say PCs, you can customize them a lot more in certain ways. So I'm not hating on PCs, because I have a lot of friends who love PCs and they'll fight me all day on it, and that's fine. But I think out of the box, Mac, it just works for me. And if you do get a PC, you're going to want an audio interface for sure. And that could be an issue if you say you go to a coffee shop and you want to put on headphones and work on a track, then you could still download that ACO for All driver. And if you do have issues, then that should help. But that's just kind of a long story short. Yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And I fought this for a long time. I was like, I'm not going to give in to this Apple craze. I'm going to stick to my PC. And I personally spent a lot of time with like weird glitches with software, and then I had to work out what was going on. And if I think about the amount of time I spent troubleshooting, it was pretty crazy, because as soon as I got a Mac, all those problems just disappeared, and I've never had to kind of think about things or waste time in that way. And also a couple of times my PC crashed during a live set, and that was the worst. And I feel like that fear just doesn't exist with my Mac. Obviously things can go wrong and nothing is perfect, but it just feels a lot more solid.
Yeah. I'm running, right now I have the Mac Mini that I use as my studio desktop computer, and it just flies. I love it. It's crazy how much cheaper computers are getting in the Mac world for a lot more power. With the new M1 chip, I don't know if you followed up on that much lately, they're going to release a new version of the M1, which I think came out in it was like March or April this year, was the M1 chip. Basically, they took the technology inside of an iPhone, because it has a chip that runs all the technology, and they put that into a Mac. So it doesn't have to, well, basically, to simple it down, the computer doesn't have to talk to as many different parts of itself, because it's all in one central located chip. So that's a really nice new technology that Mac rolled out and that they're going to be using for their future computers. So it's crazy fast, and I love it. I haven't had any problems except for like some old software that I was using.
Yeah.
So
Cool. No, that's cool that's the path that they're going down. So I just kind of wanted to dig into that a little bit because I think people can not like to have that argument, but we've both kind of had that experience for a reason. Yeah. So that's cool. And then the next thing, if we talk DAWs now, I know we're a very biased audience here. Both
what do
of
you
us
use?
Ableton as well. And,
Oh, right on. There you go.
Yeah. So both Ableton users, one of us being a certified trainer, quite a bit of bias here. But because a lot of people as well, when they're first starting out, kind of start on things like Audacity, GarageBand or something, they want to start with the free options. What are your thoughts on, when you get started, should you invest in one of, because Ableton's also not the cheapest DAW out there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I will say, shameless plug, Ableton does have a 90-day free trial now. So if you want to play with it for 3 months, go for it. And there's a lot of YouTube videos that can get you started. Or your website, Music Production for Women. But also, I think it doesn't really matter, honestly. I've had this conversation a billion times with people of like, what's the best DAW, and then there's these bunch of like old rockers from like the 80s who like argue Pro Tools is still the greatest. And then you have, people, Fruity Loops is better, whatever. I think whatever helps you get the end result that you want or need is the most important thing. So like I look at GarageBand as a gateway drug. It's like, it does what it does just to kind of bounce around little ideas, and it has those like GarageBand loops that you can drag in. But if you want to get serious about producing, then I would say a DAW like Ableton Live or even FL or something like that is better. But I think just whatever gives you the end result. Logic Pro, I'm Logic Pro certified as well. So I love Logic, I really do. I mostly use it for mixing, although I don't really use it anymore for mixing. I used to. I do everything in Ableton now. But yeah, I think as long as you get the result you want, it doesn't matter on the DAW. However, I will say for me personally, some of the reasons I love Ableton more than any other is how it uses MIDI. So if you produce any kind of electronic music, obviously you're going to be using MIDI. So the thing that's beautiful about MIDI and Ableton Live is all the different workflows it gives you. It comes with some really awesome MIDI effects, like scale, so you can lock in every note that you play. Like you could pull up your MIDI controller and smash your head on your keyboard and put a scale effect in Ableton Live on a MIDI track, and you'll never play out of key. You can do all kinds of like arpeggiated effects. It also has really great automation. So as far as being able to make automatic changes and effects happen in real time, it's just the best in my mind. So as far as that goes, I'd say Ableton's the best out of all the things I've used when it comes to MIDI for sure. And I could argue all day, but also live performance. So if anybody wants to perform live, Ableton Live was originally created for live performance with session view, which is the thing that confuses the hell out of people when they first open Ableton. They're like, what is this crazy looking thing? Because it has 2 different views that you can work for, so it's more flexible in that way. But yeah, session view is great for live performance. So if you want to perform music live, and you aren't just going to use like standard CDJs in a club and just DJ, like if you want to actually perform with real instruments and live instruments, whether it's vocals, guitar, whatever, Ableton Live is the standard in the music industry by far.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, I think that was non-biased enough answer, which is great.
Good. I try my best. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and honestly, I've done a lot of playback engineering, or I've done a lot of training with playback engineering as well, which if anybody doesn't know what playback engineering is, that's become like a real career path for people using Ableton Live. They're like major tours like Ariana Grande and The Weeknd and people like that. They have like their own dedicated person running Ableton on their laptop side stage. like taking all their tracks from the studio to set it up to perform it live however they want. So I've done some work like that for some major artists and things. So, as far as that goes, there's a whole world of possibilities on stage with Ableton as well as the studio.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. And then you kind of spoke about an audio interface maybe as being the next thing after you've got your laptop and your headphones. Do you have any recommendations on what you're kind of looking for and maybe what you think is a good entry-level interface?
Yeah, I think once again, it depends on your budget, but I do love the Focusrite series. They have a Scarlett. If you're on a budget, the Scarlett like 2i4 or the 4i4 is great. And a lot of it has to do with how many inputs you need. So if you're just a singer-songwriter and you just only want to record your guitar and vocals at the same time, you're going to want at least 2 inputs. So like the 2i2 would even work for you. But for me, like I said, I record a lot of drums. I want at least 8 inputs at every given time. So I use Universal Audio. They have the Apollo, which is like their flagship, and I love that thing. And the really interesting thing about it is they have a lot of their own plugins that run on the actual interface hardware itself. So when you think about running plugins in Ableton Live, basically it's running all of it in the audio interface before it actually records in your DAW, like in Ableton. So you can really beef up the sound. So I'll always do a little bit of compression to tighten up the sound before it gets recorded into Ableton, which actually really helps improve the sound. So little things like that. That's one reason I love Universal Audio. It is more expensive, so it'll hurt your piggy bank, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it in my mind if you have the money. But yeah, Focusrite. And then also, let's see what else. I will have to say Audient makes some good interfaces too. Shameless plug. They actually sponsored my podcast, so I feel like I have to say that. But they do make great interfaces too.
Yeah. I actually have the ID14, so
oh, nice.
It's a nice
Do you love it?
Yeah, it's great. That's a nice thing. And then I think the EVO brand as well, I think is a nice entry level thing. The EVO 4 as well is just so light, and you can just chuck it in a bag, and it's a kind of easy thing to carry around if you want to do that. Yeah, cool. And then so we've got our kind of laptop and headphones, and we've got an audio interface. And would you be thinking about monitors as well? And how do you think that helps with your production as well?
Yeah, definitely. And before we even go there, I have to say that more importantly, I would say treat the room before you even think about your speakers. That's something a lot of producers newer don't even think about or don't know how to do. And I'd say if you're going to live in a place like your apartment or your home, and you know that that's going to be your studio room, it's definitely worth treating the walls with acoustic foam. There's websites like acousticfields.com where they do like my friend Dennis does like a free room analysis. He's like one of the smartest people in the world of acoustics I've ever heard of. And he'll do like an analysis. You just tell him the dimensions of your room, you take measurements, and then he'll actually like create a custom plan for treating your room.
Wow.
And then most likely will try to sell you on his stuff. But he's great. He did my studio. So that's the thing is like if you want to buy really big monitors and like a subwoofer and you just want a great sound, it doesn't matter what kind of speakers you get because you're only as good as you can hear, and the room that you're in makes all the difference as far as what you can or cannot hear. So that's the first thing I have to say first. That being said, right in front of me right now, I have Focals. They're CMS 65s. It's like French speakers. I love these things. They're my babies. And there's Rockets. If you're like on a budget, there's the Rocket KRKs aren't bad. There's like Atom Audio makes really good speakers too for, people on a budget. There's a lot of good speakers out there. But once again, if you have really big speakers that are like, say 8-inch, like the HS8s or something for Yamaha, those are really great speakers. But they're so huge that if you have a really tiny room, like the analogy I use is say you have like a pitcher of water, right? And the pitcher is the size of your room. and the sound is the water, and you just keep pouring water in there. So if you have really big speakers, you're dumping a ton of water of sound into that pitcher, and it's going to overflow and it's going to make a mess. The same thing happens when you're listening in a small room, is you have only so much space for all that sound pressure to live in. So if you're shoving all that bass, especially bass, for big speakers, then it's going to cause more problems for you, actually, than what it's helping. I will say, if you do have the extra money, I have to say Subpack also sponsors me as Philia, so I have to say that just to be honest. But I love my Subpack. This thing's beautiful. I don't know if you have ever tried one. Have you ever tried one? Yeah, so it's this little speaker that you wear. And it's this thing.
Gosh.
So you stick it on the back of your chair. They also make a book bag version that you can wear around Bluetooth, which is kind of cool. But it's a subwoofer. And I think it goes up to like 240 hertz or something like that. But yeah, you just like lean against it and you can feel the bass. It's awesome.
Wow.
Actually,
That's
like
cool.
the big money maker for Subpack is in like really fancy, expensive cars. They actually build the subwoofer Subpack into the seats themselves. Yeah, but this thing is a game changer. Like I said, if you are in a tiny room, say your bedroom at home, and you just can't hear the bass very well, or say you bounce a song and you listen to it in your car and you're like, holy shit, this bass is so loud. It's because you can't hear it because your room's too small. So Subpack's a really good workaround with headphones.
Okay.
Love this thing. I will say they're always out of stock though on their site. So if you sign up for their email list and they say we've got more inventory, you should probably jump on it quick.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good to know. That's an interesting workaround. Like you said, if you don't have the room for a bass, for a subwoofer or something. Okay, that's cool. And then you mentioned kind of microphones, and you'd probably have a few if you're recording drums. If you're kind of starting out, and you don't know kind of what mic is a good choice, do you have any sort of all-round workhorses that you think are really good to have in your kit?
Yeah, I would say the SM7B is probably one of the first things that come to mind. It's a really famous microphone. Michael Jackson used it. A lot of famous artists have used it. But it's like not that expensive as far as like a really good mic goes. It sounds easily like 2 or 3 times what it's actually worth. That one's really cool. Rhodes makes some really good entry-level mics. The NT1A, I believe. Yeah, the NT1A, it's like $200. That thing sounds really good for vocals or even just recording guitar. It's an all-around kind of mic. So I would say that's a good one too. Right now, sitting next to me, my go-to all-around mic in my studio is my Neumann Tlm-102. I find that just sounds really good for male vocals, personally. But it's also great for anything. I use it to mic my drum set for my overheads. I use it for guitar, my acoustic guitar. It's just a great microphone. Neumann makes amazing mics. They're not cheap. But yeah, Rhodes makes some good entry-level mics as well. I will say, I'm drawing a blank right now. What is that other microphone I'm thinking of? That's because I just woke up from that nap. I'm like thinking really hard about it. It'll come back to me later. I'll have to think of it. But anyway, those are a couple off the top of my head that come to mind. Also, obviously the SM58. I feel like that should have been the first one I said. SM50, it's $100 mic. You could throw it off a bridge and it won't break. Those things are so durable and you can use it literally for anything. The SM58, I've used it for vocals. I've used it for my guitar. I use it for my snare drum. Use it for everything. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. And okay, so we've gone through the laptops, the kind of interface and monitors. What about MIDI controllers? Is that something that you use and you think is useful for people to get? Yes. The answer is yes. I honestly have so many MIDI controllers. It's absurd. I don't even use half of them. It's kind of stupid. One of my favorite MIDI keyboards is the Akai MPK. So if you're looking for like a small keyboard or even one of their bigger keyboards, they have like a 25, a 49, and 61 keys version.
So depending on the size, whether you want to take it on the road or just keep it in the studio. But the Akai makes great stuff, the MPK. I also have the Arturia Keylab 61, and I love that thing too. It's pretty affordable.
Yeah.
It's pretty lightweight if you want to move it around. But I would say my number one most used MIDI controller is my Push 2, which is it was the first and only MIDI controller made by Ableton Live, or Ableton, I should say. And it's awesome because if you don't have a lot of great music theory, which I don't, honestly, my music theory is not fantastic at all. So you can lock the pads into scale. So you'll never play out of key, and you can quickly jump in and just start playing right away. And it also is just kind of a one and done MIDI controller. They designed it so you don't necessarily have to use your mouse and jump back and forth between the computer and MIDI controller, because you could do mostly anything you would want to do on the Push itself without having to go to the computer. So it just makes for like a faster workflow in that sense, which is really nice. Big fan of that. I mean, those are the main ones I play with. I had a launch pad. I like the launch pad too. If you were looking just for something to like finger drum on, that thing's kind of nice. A lot of people love the MPC. That's a classic controller too, but I don't have one. I know friends who love it.
Yeah. I mean, if those are the first ones that jump to your head, they're probably the ones that you use most.
For sure.
Yeah, cool. So, we talked about the different types of gear, and say there's something that's on your mind to get. How much research or analysis do you do before you go out and make that purchase?
I mean, anymore, I think I usually just call a friend and just like ask them, be like, hey, because I have a lot of friends who are also music nerds who own tons of MIDI controllers, so I probably have somebody I could talk to about it. But I think it's important to like really research like why you're wanting the MIDI controller to use it. So for example, if you want to buy a MIDI keyboard and you want to be able to finger drum on it, then you probably want something that has pads that you can beat on. If you're also going to use it to play piano and notes, then it's nice to get something that has both. So that's just like one example. Maybe you want something with faders that you can turn, or like map automation so you can like have this like sweeping filter sound that you can move. There's just something nice about having your fingers on like a physical controller as you're like playing the music, even if it's just for effects. So finding a MIDI controller that does that based off of what you're wanting to do. Another example would be the APC-40. The APC-40 is like one of the most popular MIDI controllers for any kind of live performance, and I use that to DJ. So I DJ in Ableton Live, and I use that to DJ. It has a lot of options. So I love that thing. But as far as doing research, yeah, I think it's important. Like, look on forums. There's a ton of forums online. You could search. Ableton has a great forum. There's, Reddit. You could totally just search Reddit real hard and find a lot of music gear nerds up there. Gear Sluts is another popular one, although I feel like there's just a bunch of trolls there now. I feel like a lot of people just like trolling each other on there. But also reverb.com is a good place as well. I don't know if they ship to Australia, but here in the States, in the United States, and I think Canada, it's a great place where I can buy really lightly used gear or B stock for pretty cheap. And they have a lot of reviews on there too you can check out.
Yeah, cool. Okay. And do you have any advice for someone who's just kind of in the research loop and just is completely overwhelmed by the amount of things that different people are telling them?
I mean, YouTube is a whole entire world of information. And my personal feeling is nobody has an excuse not to get started. Because even if you have, like, unless you don't have a computer whatsoever, then maybe. But if you have a computer, and even if it's a crappy computer, like, you can still use music software on it. You might just not be able to do everything you'd ever want on it because it'd probably get real slow. But I mean, you can download a free trial of Ableton. You can start playing around. There's tons of sounds and effects. There's YouTube. Just go in and just look up like how to get started in Ableton Live. You'll find like 6,000 things that pop up. So I don't think anybody has an excuse not to try it, or at least to jump in it and play around. I think as far as people feeling stuck and not getting started, it's like you're kind of your biggest obstacle at that point.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, good point. And so we've talked a lot about kind of gear and what you need from that perspective. But do you think also, as far as having the perfect home studio, do you think there's something around other things to create a vibe and a kind of space that you really like to work in?
I think for me, I like to have sunlight. Sorry, I just choked on my water. Yeah, I live next to a lake, so like sunlight's really nice and important to me. Although I will say like having a bunch of glass and windows is not ideal for your acoustic studio. But, as far as a vibe, I think just get comfortable. There is something to say like producing when you're more comfortable in like a space that has everything plugged in, ready to go is so helpful because you produce so much faster. If you have all of your toys and everything's routed and plugged in, you just sit down. When you have that creative burst of inspiration, like there's nothing worse when, say, your guitar isn't plugged in and you're like, oh crap, and I have to plug it in. And then like, maybe your MIDI controller isn't set up and you have to set that up. Like having a space where you can comfortably sit and just go whenever you have that creative fuel that hits you, because it comes and goes. I think, creative inspiration comes and goes, like I was saying. So whenever I have that feeling where I'm just inspired and I'm like, man, I just want to make some music, or I have this idea that just hits me in my head, like I just have to do it. I just have to do it right away. And not having everything set up and ready to go in my studio is like the worst thing, because then it just takes longer to get that result or just to get it out.
Yeah. 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 No, that's a good point for sure. Kind of having things set up and ready to go. Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Dan. That was really useful. And I think lots to think about for someone kind of starting out in this journey. And we have a couple of questions from our audience for you just before we wrap up. So I think one of them you've sort of covered, actually. The first one is from Tiffy Diffy from Instagram. So they asked, what's the perfect setup? 3 months in, 1 year in, and 5 years in?
First of all, that's an awesome name, Tiffy Diffy. I love that. What's the perfect setup in 3 months, 1 year? Is that like my perfect setup, or is that the perfect setup for them? Because I feel like that's totally dependent on the person.
Yeah. That's a good point. And I would say however you interpret that question. So if it's for you, it can be for you, but it's hard to say, I guess, if you don't know the person.
Okay, I'll try to answer both. I say the perfect setup in 3 months for you, Tiffy Diffy. Like I would say just get a good headphones, good laptop, and or desktop, and just spend some time trying to learn something every day, and then build from there. It could come to a place of where it's like I'm producing house music, but maybe I don't have a lot of really good bass synth sounds. So maybe I need to find some more synthesizer sounds. Arturia is a great library, so that might be worth investing in. Arturia V Collection is one of my favorite synth libraries in the world. So it doesn't have to be necessarily gear. I think having a good sound library is everything too, because there's nothing worse than like you're only using crappy sounds and then it's like discouraging. So I think having a good sample library or sound library, even splice.com, you can get a ridiculous amount of credits to download samples, and that's helpful getting started for anybody newer. So in the first 3 months might be something to consider, or up to a year, I guess. Ableton Live has a lot of packs too, so check out the packs before I jump off of that. 5 years in, good microphone, speakers, acoustic treatment for your room. Once again, depends on your setup or who you are, I guess. For me personally, I would love to have a studio where I can fully track acoustic drums. I'm in an apartment right now, so I can only be so loud. So I have an acoustic electric hybrid setup. But I would love just to be as loud as possible and not have to piss off the neighbors by just like beating drums. So I probably would have that. Probably 2 Apollo interfaces linked together. Maybe like, a coffee bar in the studio.
Nice.
And like a on-staff masseuse. Just kidding.
Why not?
I mean, if we're gonna dream, let's go big, right? Like, might as well. But yeah, and then maybe a couple guitar amps. I don't know, someplace where I could jam with my band, because I play as a solo DJ project, and then I also have a live band with saxophone and keys too. So big enough place where we don't have to cram into my apartment and be as loud as we possibly want.
Love it. That's great.
That's my answer.
Thank you. No, that was really good. Actually, just expanding a little bit on the sound libraries thing, like, do you have any recommendations? I know you mentioned a couple, but are there some that you think have really been a game changer for you?
Starting out in the very beginning, Splice was helpful because it taught me just like how to actually import audio and like slice and cut and do a bunch of editing basics to the audio itself. And also they have a lot of sounds that just sound good. So it's more inspiring right out of the gate. But, as far as plugins go, before you go down that deep, dark path of buying a bunch of stuff you don't need, check out Ableton Live's packs. Live comes with a ton of packs of a lot of really great sounds, and they're adding new ones constantly. So that's included. But then also, like I use Serum. Vital is a new synth that a lot of people are calling like the new Serum. It's free. You just pay more for presets. So that's interesting. Vital is really blowing up right now. There's also, like I said, Arturia V Collection. If you want a bunch of pianos or like analog sounding synthesizers, that library is amazing. I use it all the time. And I'd say Universal Audio has some great plugins for mixing, like the LA2A. It's my favorite compressor. FabFilter has some great plugins for mixing. If we're just going down the line of stuff I use, if you want an EQ that like it feels like it's cheating because it's so easy, Soothe 2, it's really popular. Yeah, Soothe 2 is amazing. And then as far as a reverb goes, one of my favorite reverbs is Valhalla. It's like $50. It's pretty cheap. So Valhalla makes some really good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. Thank you. And then the last question, you did touch on this already, but it was from Edna, and Edna asked, are Yamaha HS8s too big for a home studio? And she just wants it mainly to hear the low end. So would a workaround, I mean, the sub pack you suggested could be one, but anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, the sub pack definitely could help. I don't know the size of a room, so it could be something just to research and test. Worst case scenario, if you buy them and you listen and test them in your room and it just doesn't sound ideal, listen to other songs that you really love on your speakers and walk around the room and just kind of get a feel. If you hear anything kind of disappear, like maybe you don't hear as much bass or you don't hear as much of the mid-range. Another thing you can do as a cheap hack to kind of figure out how your room is sounding is, say you go into Ableton Live preferences, then you can do a test tone. And if you turn that on, then you can click the tone frequency, and you could basically click and drag and sweep from 0 hertz all the way up to, I think it's like 20,000 hertz or something. Actually, yeah, up to 20,000 hertz. And if you hear anything really drop out or disappear, then you know that that's an issue in your room with that frequency. It could be an issue.
Okay.
So that's just like another hack. There's also Sonar Works, and you could buy their microphone for $100, and then they actually you go around and you do a bunch of test tones with the mic in your room, and then they actually have like a driver on your computer that will fix the mistakes for you on your speakers in your room. And I've heard a lot of mixed reviews. I've heard a lot of people really love it. They sent me a microphone because they sent all of the certified trainers in Ableton One, but I haven't used it, so I can't speak to it. But I know that that's a popular option too. Sonar Works.
Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you. That's useful. All right, so we've gotten to the end of the podcast, Dan. So that's been loads of really useful information there. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And
Thanks for having me.
It's been lovely. And what's on for the rest of your evening now that hopefully you're awake after your nap?
Yeah, right. Yeah, probably gonna go grab food and maybe take another nap. Pretty tired.
Fair enough. Okay, maybe it's time for a chill evening. Yeah.
Yeah. Tomorrow, though, I'll be back working on my EP, which I'm going to be releasing in November this year as Philia.
Awesome.
So
yeah.
Pretty
Cool.
excited for that. That's keeping me busy too.
Yeah. Do you know how many tracks you're aiming for?
Yeah, I'm looking at 5 tracks right now. One being more of an intro build up. It's kind of like electronic, funky bass music. So,
Cool. Okay. And we will look out for that. So if people want to find you, is Live Producers Online the best place?
yeah, actually, I'm on Instagram probably more than anywhere. So if you want to connect with me there, it's Philia Music. So it's PHILIA Music. And then I also, if you want to follow the Ableton side of things, that's Live Producers Online is my handle. And then, if you want to follow my podcast as well, then it's just the Ableton Music Producer Podcast. And you can go to liveproducersonline.com/podcast. And that's also where you can find my membership and stuff. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Dan. And I will leave you to your chill evening. So have a good one.
Awesome.
All right.
Yeah, thanks, Xylo. This has been fun.
Sounds good. All right. Bye.
Take it easy. Bye.